greater ability to self-edit. We can make sure impressions people form of us are good, and we've got more control over the content we put out. All of these factors are true of social networking sites. They're largely asynchronous, we can optimally self-present, and we can edit our online profiles to make sure this is the case. Use of social networks then can fulfill uses and gratifications. Now, the relevant theory surrounding this is the uses and gratifications framework, which proposed that people engage with certain media types because it fulfills certain desires in certain ways for them, and that is their choice of media. So specific desires for use can be linked to Facebook and the use of certain uses of Facebook, and can relate to personality and self-evaluation factors. So, people's self-views influence what they think, what they feel, and what they do. It relates to the self-concept. Now, I was particularly interested in the clarity of self-concept, and that's to do with how clear people's self-beliefs are. I was also interested in self-esteem, which is related to the self-concept as well. And that, obviously, as we all know, is to do with the feelings about ourselves, so if we have a high or low opinion of ourselves in general. Related to this as well is self-evaluation, evaluating the self, and we can do this via social comparisons. Social comparison theory was first brought into a theory by Pestinger in 1954, and he proposed that basically, in the absence of objective standards, we like to try and evaluate ourselves by looking at other people as a social comparison. And the main reason to do this is to gain accurate self-evaluations. So how then might these different self-evaluation factors influence use of Facebook? I asked myself. Might low self-concept clarity people prefer different aspects of it so they can put out different aspects of themselves, disclose things or keep things in that they don't want people to judge them on? Might low self-esteem people be motivated to self-improve or self-enhance, and how might this affect the way they use the site? Might those who compare themselves a lot to other people need this information from self-evaluation and therefore use different methods of using the site? Researchers looked at some of this, but not all of it. Research suggests that low self-esteem people use Facebook differently to high self-esteem people. They tend to have more friends, they tend to lurk more, but when they do post, it tends to be more negative content. Whereas high self-esteem people tend to make more comments. What research hasn't done is looked at all these self-evaluation variables in combination with an examination of actual, real Facebook content, which is where what I've done comes in. I looked at how different self-evaluation factors influence self-presentation on Facebook. So, how did I do this? Right. I got participants to complete demographic information, a self-esteem scale, social comparison scale, self-concept clarity scale. These are all S words, it's really right. And I'll explain more about those different scales in a minute. They friended me on Facebook, and as soon as that happened, I had to have a course on how to use Facebook because I've never used it before. It enabled me to look at their profile and all their associated content. I'll quickly mention the participants. There was 92 of them. They were mostly from the participant pool here, and some of them were obtained through snowball sampling. They had a mean age of 26.28, and they ranged between 18 and 62 years, so there was quite a broad range of people. To talk about the measures then, I used the Rosenbergs self-esteem scale. Now this one asks people to agree, well, the extent they agree with a series of scenarios, and they can agree between strongly agree through to strongly disagree, and they indicate the extent to which this is. People can score high or low. If people score high, they're said to have high self-esteem, and if people score low, they're said to have low self-esteem. I use the income to measure social comparison tendency, so how much people spend their time comparing to other people. This is a similar sort of agree to disagree type scale, and people indicate, in response to a series of scenarios, the extent to which it's true for them. People can score high or low, so if people score high, they have a high tendency to compare to other people. And if they score low, they don't tend to compare to anybody else very much. Self-concept clarity was assessed on a 5-point scale, and this looked at how sure people are in their self-beliefs, how certain they are, and how clear they are. They, again, could score between, I think it's 1 and 5, strongly disagree to strongly agree, and they could score high or low. So people who had a high score had high self-concept clarity, they were sure about themselves and their self-beliefs, and people who had a low score were not so sure, and they had lower levels of self-concept clarity. So, from the profiles, I obtained some information about the number of friends people had. I looked at the last 10 status updates the participants had posted. I looked at the number of times they updated their profile picture or cover photo, the number of comments, the number of likes, and the total number of words on all the status updates. So, say for person 1, I would have totaled up all their status updates and seen how many words there were. I also used a language software, which I'm not going to attempt to say, and I assessed them for positive emotion, negative emotion, tentative or certain type language, past, present or future language, and anxiety, anger and sound-related words. So people then had a total score for each of these word types. I was predicting the differences in the self-evaluation variables would predict differences in the number of friends and the type of content people posted. The results were that, I did a backward regression on SPSS, and several of them, and the predictors were the self-evaluation variables. I found that people with a low level of self-concept clarity had more friends. So the people who weren't very sure about their self-beliefs had more Facebook friends. People with a low level of self-esteem had used more present tense words. People who had a high level of self-concept clarity used more comments and more words than people lower on this score. And people with a high level of social comparison tendency also used more words and comments than people who didn't compare themselves to other people very much. So, why might I have found this? Firstly, low self-concept clarity people had a greater number of friends. The research suggests that social networking sites enable people to have lots of different contacts, and it enables them to present lots of different selves to different contacts. On Facebook, this might present as lots of Facebook friends. It might enable people to try out different social identities until they become more confident in themselves. And also, it might increase self-concept clarity. Festinger has noted that if people are uncertain in their self-beliefs, they will make attempts to become more certain, and that might play a role here. So, Facebook might actually strengthen the self-concept clarity of individuals, and expressing themselves through a large number of friends may help them with that and shape their selves. So, we also found that low self-esteem people use more present tense words. Oh, I'm joking. Right, I've done one. Research suggests that low self-esteem people are less confident in their abilities and beliefs. They have less confidence in their opinions. So they might restrict themselves to talking only about their present self because that is they're more confident in that than they are in who they might be or who they have been. I looked at 10% of the status updates of the low self-esteem people the other day. I'm going to do a bit more than that. But I found that mostly people were talking about who they were with and where they were, just limiting themselves to the geography of it and who they were with. Now, I don't think you have to have a lot of confidence to just say that, so perhaps that would explain it. It might be a self-protective mechanism. Also, they might be trying to self-improve, which again links to low self-esteem. But I also found that high social comparison tendency people use more words, and this might relate to the fact that they are more confident. No, it doesn't. High social comparison tendency people use more comments because Facebook's ideal for finding out what other people think and what they do. You can use this information to inform your social comparisons. I think that's what was happening there. People who need to compare a lot find out what others are doing and writing comparisons by writing a lot and saying, what do you think compared to me? And that informs their social comparisons. High self-concept clarity people, I think, use more words and comments because they were more confident in what they believed. I didn't assess the direction of comparison, so I don't know if people compared to people better than them or worse than them. I could have done that, so that's something to consider. I only looked at 10 status updates, so it might be useful to look at a more longitudinal scale. The implications then, I think it might actually help us understand why some people are drawn to Facebook. Some people might like it because it meets certain uses and gratifications. It might help, say, low self-esteem people to self-improve, for example. And in the future, I hope to look at this data a bit more and to see the extent to which people used I and you type words and how that melded into their self-evaluation factors. Hopefully, combined, this will tell us a bit more about how people use self-evaluation to inform the use of social media.